Blackberries, one of nature's superfoods. Let's see what else we can do with them. Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the wood in my garden. So as most of you know, I am a huge aficionado of raised beds. I do virtually all of my gardening in raised beds. I have 84 on the property and growing. You know, I build more every year. As well as I have these herb planters here, probably about 60 of them all over the property, growing anything from herbs to flowers to, oh, some of them even have small strawberry plants in them. It's endless. As well, 5 years ago, I built this 400 square foot greenhouse all by myself, comprised entirely of 2x4s. So I've worked with a lot of wood over the years to build this garden. And in doing so, I've stained a lot of wood. And I've always stained with commercial stains. So the takeaway from that intro is, I've worked with a lot of lumber on this farm. I worked with a lot of lumber to build this farm. Now obviously, being an organic farm, I was very limited in the types of stains that I actually could use. For fear of them leaching into the soil and getting into the vegetables, getting into the water system. So a lot of times that drove up the price of the stain while not necessarily giving a better quality stain. And so when you're building these projects like a greenhouse or a garden bed, first and foremost is functionality, but a close second is longevity. And you achieve longevity with these wood projects by preserving the wood, usually with a paint or stain. Now, I've always preferred stains because they soak into the wood and they really seem to preserve it, and you don't need to use them every year. You know, paint will peel, it'll chip, you have to reapply it, it's messy. I've always preferred stains over paints myself. Now, having said that, for the last couple of years, I've been searching for a better solution, for a better product that I could use on my beds and my greenhouses and my fences and my arbors and everything else built out of wood. So in this video today, I want to show you how you can make the best DIY organic stain from just 3 ingredients. And one of those ingredients is the blackberry. Oh man, I love blackberries. So before we get started, I have to actually go collect our first ingredient, which is the blackberries. So how many blackberries you use is determined by, how big a batch of stain you want to make, as well as how dark you want to make the stain. I would suggest, with a healthy amount of blackberries first, and then experimenting. Try using more blackberries, less blackberries, and recording the results as you go along. So we have a healthy amount of blackberries here. I've done enough just to cover the bottom of the pot. Maybe a couple more. That should be enough for what I'm trying to make. So let's look at our ingredients. Number 1, of course, you have your blackberries. Now, number 2 is agricultural vinegar. And all that is vinegar with a 10% acetic acid, as opposed to household vinegar, which has a 5% acetic acid. And the third item we have is steel wool. We only need one of these. This is a 3-pack, but I might make 3 different batches of stain, so this is the one that I bought. So steel wool is the third ingredient that you use. Now these 2 ingredients, the steel wool and the vinegar, get used together, but for right now, we're just going to concentrate on what we have to do with the blackberries in stage 1. So the first step is actually boiling your blackberries. So you want to do this to unlock all those dyes that are inside each of those blackberries. And to do this, you got to boil them. But you want to boil them in as little water as possible. We don't want to dilute the dye solution. We want to make it as concentrated as possible. And we don't want water to be the base of our stain. the base of our stain is actually going to be the vinegar. So you really want to boil these in about an inch of water, depending on how many blackberries you have in there. Now, what I found is you want to boil these guys for about a half an hour. Boiling any less, and it does result in a bit of a weaker solution, a bit of a weaker dye. And I found boiling it for 2-3 hours doesn't really change much after half an hour. So I've always just boiled these guys for half an hour. So we'll set the timer. And we'll let these guys go for about half an hour. Now, don't walk away. Because we're boiling with such little water, you might need to add a little bit more because they could dry out and burn. And one more thing in this stage, I don't boil with the vinegar. Boiling acids is not safe, so you definitely just want to use regular water for this part. All right, so these guys have been boiling for a little over 10 minutes now, and that water is turning bright, bright purple. And the house smells like a candy store. It's pretty awesome. So we'll come back at the 10-minute mark, and I'll show you what you do for the home stretch. Okay, so we got 10 minutes left here. I did have to add a little bit more water. It was starting to dry out a bit, but that's fine. We're really unlocking the dyes in here. But this is what you do in the final 10 minutes, is take your potato masher. Ooh, that's hot. And really grind up those blackberries. There we go. You really want to unlock the potential of these dyes. And so you got to break up the blackberries more than simply boiling them. So let this go for another 10 minutes, and then we can start step 2. All right, so the time is up. This has been boiling for about 30 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, it was boiling after it was mashed. So you want to take this off the heat. Whew. And you want to let it cool down. Now, you can throw it in the freezer. Depending on how much liquid is in there, you could chuck a couple ice cubes in. I'm just going to let this sit on the stovetop for a little bit until it's cool enough that we can work with it. Okay, so our blackberry mixture has cooled down considerably to a temperature that's safe enough to work with. It is now time for the other 2 ingredients. So the next thing you're going to want to do is add one of your steel wools. So this is just regular steel wool that you buy at the hardware store, your grocery store. Just spread it apart a little bit, get that surface area going. Okay, and then throw it in your mixture. Okay. And now you're ready for your 3rd ingredient, which is the vinegar. Now, how much you add? I've done this a few times, and what I found to work best is I add double of the blackberry mixture. So you're going to want enough to cover the steel wool, but you don't want so much that you're diluting the liquid to be more and more clear. So I use double what's in there already, and I just do it by eyeball. You can measure this stuff out if you want to, but you don't have to. Now be careful, because this is a 10% acid. There we go. Just enough to cover the steel wool. So by now, we're about 40% of the way into this project, but 90% of the work is done. All you do now is let this sit for 24 to 48 hours. And the longer you let it sit, the darker it's going to get. So you can play around with duration to make different colored and different intensity of stains. But generally, I use 24 hours, and that seems to be sufficient for what I'm doing. So we'll just give it a final stir, and then we'll let this guy sit for 24 hours. And you can see it's already staining my wood spoon. So here's one of the fence posts that I stained probably about 6 years ago. So, you know, I would have sanded it, put 2-3 coats on, and it's kind of acting like paint. Like not even commercial stains last forever. All right, guys, it's been 24 hours, almost to the minute. Let's check on our stain. All right, so you can see the stain has really darkened up. Really taken on sort of a black purpley color, which is exactly what we want. So the next step is to get all the particulate matter out of here so that we can use it as a stain. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go and grab our steel wool. Take it out of there. Put it on the paper. Okay, give this a good stir. You know, it almost smells like wine. Blackberry wine. And you can see what it's done to the spoon. Nice. Okay, so now we want to strain it. So straining this guy is super simple. You know, just get a small micron strainer, get your container that you want your stain in, and simply go ahead and strain it. Try not to spill. Oh, looks like it's going to fill the container just. Okay, that is our stain. So now the stain is done. Let's go try it out on some wood. Okay, so 2 rules when you're staining. You always want to pour your stain into a smaller container. You never want to work out of the main can or your main source of stain, whether it's commercial or a DIY stain. You know, always pour it into a smaller portable container. That way, if you spill it, you don't lose the whole mix. It's easier to maneuver around. It's just all around good practice. Now, the second rule of staining is you always got to sand the wood. I usually sand it 2 to 3 times, depending on what I'm doing and what I'm building, whether it's, you know, for the outdoors or whether it's for the living room. But I always sand the wood. You need to sand the wood to take off that outer layer so that the stain can set properly into the wood. So I've got 3 types of wood here. I've got a cedar, I've got a fir, and I got a pine. I'm going to go and sand those guys right now so we can get ready to stain these guys and see what this stain looks like. Okay, so we have our 3 pieces of wood all sanded, ready to accept the stain. We got a small container of stain here, and we have a spare rag to apply the stain. So without further ado, let's see what this thing looks like on the cedar. It's really quite purple. Okay, darkening up nicely. Okay, now let's go ahead and try the fir. A lot more purple on this one. Okay, now we'll try the pine. Okay, so let's let these guys sit for about 10 minutes and come back and see what they look like. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes You can already see it getting darker. So let's go ahead and put the second coat on. I always do at least 2 coats of stain. You know, it's just like paint. You know, that first one really soaks in, and then you put that second one on just to really darken it up and give it some color. Okay, so we'll let that sit for another 10 minutes and we'll see the final results. Okay, so it's been another 10 minutes, and as you can see, both the fir and the pine have darkened up nicely. The cedar took the stain right away and darkened up, even after the first coat. But it took a second coat and another 10 minutes for that fir and that pine to really start, not only to absorb that stain, but to also have that stain, really color those wood fibers. So now that I've shown you how to make the stain, and I've showed you how to apply the stain, and let me tell you a few tips and tricks so you can make your DIY stain projects always successful. Alright guys, so if you skip to the end of the video, here's a recap of what we talked about. We set out to make a DIY stain using only 3 ingredients. We used blackberries, we used agricultural vinegar, which is vinegar with a 10% acetic acid instead of household, which is 5%, and we used steel wool. We then boiled the blackberries, for about 30 minutes to really unlock all those dyes that are inside the berries. We cooled it down, and then we added double the amount of the agricultural vinegar. Then we submerged the steel wool in that solution, and we let it sit for 24 hours. So let me tell you a little bit about why this works. We use vinegar as the base of our solution because vinegar oxidizes. Vinegar alone will turn that wood a little bit dark. And then we use the blackberries, to give that stain a little bit of color, as well as give it a little bit of longevity. Blackberry stain lasts a long time. It doesn't degrade with the weather, and it doesn't degrade in full sunlight. Now lastly, we use the steel wool so that it would rust and add a little bit of brown and red to the solution to take a bit of the edge off the purple from the blackberries. Now you don't have to use steel wool. You can use rusty nails. Any sort of metal is fine, but it can't be stainless steel. It shouldn't be galvanized, and it shouldn't be coated with anything. You want the metal to rust as fast as possible. You're only soaking this for 24 hours. And yes, the vinegar does accelerate that rusting, but stainless steel simply won't work, and galvanized will take too long for it to rust. Now that we know all that, we can experiment. We can leave this solution for a week and see what color it turns. We could add less blackberries and use more metal to create more rust. We can eliminate the blackberries completely and go with a reddish brown color. The possibilities, they're really endless. But if you're growing exclusively in raised beds like I am, there doesn't really exist commercial stains that are safe enough and long-lasting enough for you to use on your veggie beds. So I strongly suggest making your own. Not only is it fun, but you're not adding harmful chemicals, to your soil and your food supply. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. As always, leave any questions or comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with your DIY stain projects. Click subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you that have, I really do appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, I just wanted to give you a sneak peek on this bed that I built. It's for another video, but I used the blackberry stain that we made on the wood. So you can see how it really darkened up. And it turned out great. It turned out great. So I sanded it twice, and I did 2 coats of the stain on the outside, 1 coat on the inside, so you can see why it's a little bit lighter. But yeah, this bed is going to be for a set of grapevines that actually grows up my shed. I'm going to do companion planting with I think it's a white grape, so it's a white table grape with some strawberries down the sides. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a look at this stain in action. I'm really impressed with how it turned out. If you saw it in person, you would think it's a commercial stain. It's just unbelievable. It's just blackberries and vinegar. That's crazy.